Welcome to the book reading program of 3ABN Australia Radio. Does your faith need a boost? Do you think that miracles only happened in Bible times? Think again. Compiled by Remnant Publications, the book Get Ready for a Miracle recounts true stories that prove that when we step out in faith, God displays His power in undeniable ways. Here is our reader, Sandra Ashton.
This story is entitled, A Modern Day Resurrection. Matthew chapter 19 verse 14 says, Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for of such is the kingdom of heaven." While tending to a mild wound on my oldest son's head, I noticed my 5-year-old daughter, Madison, approaching. She came and stood by as if waiting patiently for her turn to say something. She finally said, "Excuse me." "Just a minute, Madison," I replied. "I'm almost done." I continued with the wound. A minute or two later, she repeated, "Excuse me." I finally stopped to listen. Jackson drowned," she said. Now she had my undivided attention. "What do you mean, Jackson drowned?" I answered with a frantic voice. "Where is he?" My panicked tone of voice must have frightened Madison, because she was unable to answer me. So I dropped everything and decided to investigate this. Hoping she meant he was stuck in the mud of the creek bed, I picked up Kennedy, my newborn baby, and ran across the driveway, over the fence, down the hill, and into our field where the creek was. Jackson was not there. Now I feared, because there was only one place where he could actually drown, and that was the pond. I sprinted down the creek to the middle of the field where the pond was. As I approached, all my worst fears were realised. Way out in the middle of the pond was a little red figure. It was my 2-year-old Jackson, floating face down in his red sweatshirt. Without hesitation, I dropped the baby and dove in, swam to his body, and pulled him to shore. Getting him to a dry surface, I found that it was too late. There was no life in him. I tried to get water out of his lungs, but still he had no pulse and no breath. In complete disparaging anguish, I sat there on the shore with the boy I loved so dearly, who now was cold and pasty white. Jackson was dead. With nothing left to do, I raised my voice to God. "Oh God, do something! Please save him, I beg you!" Immediately, a tiny bubble came out of Jackson's nose. Then a voice seemed to tell me, now would be a good time for CPR. So I tilted his head back and gave him 2 breaths, followed by several chest compressions. All I got in return was an exhale. "Keep trying," the voice encouraged me. So again, I breathed into his lifeless soul. This time, I was rewarded with an unexpected inhale, then another. "He's alive!" I reported to my son Alex, who had made his way down to the pond. But as he continued breathing, he suddenly went into the most terrible convulsions I had ever seen. Every muscle in his body went into spasms, and he began to moan uncontrollably. It got worse and worse. A 911 call was made. An ambulance picked us up, and Jackson was rushed to the local hospital emergency room where the doctors took over. They worked feverishly, pumping his lungs and stomach that seemed to yield gallons of green water. For about an hour, they continued treating him as I stood by him in that crowded emergency room. Jackson was not improving. The convulsing and moaning persisted as bad as ever, and I was sure now that I would be visiting my beloved son in a children's hospital for the rest of his life. Then I remembered my prayer at the pond. God heard me then. Perhaps he will hear me again. I fell on my knees. Oh, God, please bring him back. Thank you for his life, but now hear me once more and restore him back to health. I arose from this prayer, leaned over my Jackson's convulsing body, and said, "Jackson, are you cold?" As I spoke to him, I reached my hand out and touched his chest. Immediately, his body relaxed. The moaning stopped. His eyes rolled back from inside his head, and he looked at me and answered, "Yes." At this point, the joy that flooded my soul was indescribable. "My Jackson is back!" I exclaimed. The nurses and doctors in the ER were stunned for a moment. Then, the whole room erupted with cheers. After a night in the intensive care unit, the hospital staff confirmed that Jackson had made a thorough recovery. And as we left, we made a special effort to thank everybody, especially the doctor in charge. "I didn't do anything," the doctor replied as he reverently pointed his finger toward heaven, indicating to whom the full credit rightly belonged. A reflection associated with this story comes from The Desire of Ages, page 483. "However much a shepherd may love his sheep, he loves his sons and daughters more." Jesus is not only our shepherd, he is our everlasting Father, and he says, "I know mine own, and mine own know me, even as the Father knoweth me, and I know the Father." John chapter 10 verse 14 and 15, Revised Version. This is a brief excerpt from a book by Larren Cole, Desire Media speaker evangelist, called A Modern Day Resurrection. This story has been featured on 3ABN on 3 different programs. You can visit desiremedia.org for more information.
You've been listening to the book reading program by 3ABN Australia Radio, featuring Get Ready for a Miracle. For more information about this book, visit remnantpublications.com.